Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Bro, as you can see, spooky season is upon us. A history of Halloween, the full documentary. I'm a huge fan of spooky season, Halloween, fall, you know what I'm saying? Best time of year. As always, make sure you like and subscribe. Comment what I should watch next. Let's get to this video, man. Let's do it.
Samhain, a word spoken softly, almost swallowed by the wind, yet it carries the weight of centuries. For the ancient Celts, Samhain was more than the end of the harvest, it was the end of light itself. As October gave way to November, the days grew shorter, the nights longer, and the world seemed to pause, caught between life and death.
Before we get too far into this, I want to say this is beautiful. The art, the vibe, the music, this is beautiful. Hopefully I don't get copyrighted. But this looking beautiful. Onward.
It was in this stillness, at the edge of winter, that Samhain opened a door to the unknown. This was a liminal time, a threshold where the veil between the mortal world and the other world was at its thinnest. On this night, the spirits of the dead could walk among the living. Ghosts and ghouls, once confined to distant memory, became immediate and real. The Celts believed these spirits were not mere spectres. They were ancestors, guardians, and sometimes vengeful entities, seeking something from those still breathing. To ward off these roaming souls or to win their favour, the people lit massive bonfires, their flames a signal to both the living and the dead. These fires blazed high on hilltops, guiding lost souls and keeping darker forces at bay. But the bonfires were not the only defence. Costumes and masks were donned, animal skins and grotesque visages, to confuse any malevolent spirits that might be prowling the darkness. Disguised as beasts and beings from the other world, the living moved through the night unnoticed by those who sought to harm them.
That's super dope. I already learned something bro. So costumes, if you ain't paying attention, costumes came from them disguising themselves as the demons and monsters that they were scared of. That's super dope. Learn something new every day. Onward.
And on doorsteps and windowsills, offerings were left. Food and drink to placate the wandering dead. Better to feed them than to feel their wrath. Central to Samhain's rituals were the Aossi, the spirits and fairies of Celtic lore. Far from the whimsical beings of later fairy tales, the Aossi were powerful and often dangerous. They were seen as the guardians of the other world, keepers of ancient knowledge, but also tempters and tricksters who could lead humans astray. On this night, more than any other, the Aossi required respect. Gifts were left to appease them, and warnings were whispered to children to stay close, lest they be spirited away. The druidic priests, the learned class of the Celts, played their part in these dark celebrations. They gathered by the firelight, casting their eyes into the flames, searching for signs from the gods. They read the future in the flickering light and curling smoke, performing sacred rites to divine the fortunes of their tribes. For them, Samhain was not just a festival, it was a time of prophecy.
What do y'all think it would have felt like to be alive back in them times? Like, it's so different that, I don't say that we smarter, but we smarter now. Like, we know what's real, what caused what, but like they was really in it deep. Or
A moment to peer into the year ahead. Would there be abundance, or would there be suffering? The answers lay in the embers. Samhain was also a night for stories, dark tales told by the fireside of spirits that could slip through the veil. Of the dead returning not as benevolent visitors, but as twisted, vengeful beings seeking to drag the living back with them. Of monsters and creatures that roamed the woods and hills, stalking the unfortunate or the unwary. For the Celts, the other world was not some distant, dreamy place. It was a shadowed mirror of our own, filled with danger, deceit, and perhaps a hint of doom. With the fire crackling and shadows dancing on stone walls, the people of the Celtic lands would keep their vigil. A night to honour the dead, to commune with spirits, and to protect against the unseen forces that might break through. Samhain would mark the end of one cycle and the beginning of another, a doorway to both the past and the future, one that even today in the modern world remains ever so slightly ajar. But the story of Samhain did not remain purely Celtic for long. The Romans arrived with their legions and their laws, and like all conquerors, they brought their gods and customs, folding the old beliefs into their own. The Romans were skilled at this, taking what was already sacred and giving it a new face. And so the firelit nights of Samhain found themselves entwined with Roman rituals that also paid homage to the cycles of life and death. Pomona was one such goddess, an ancient deity of orchards and fruitful abundance. In her honor, the Romans celebrated the harvest, but they also embraced the eerie change that autumn brought, where ripe fruit might suddenly drop and decay, reminding all of the thin line between life and death. Under Roman influence, the apple, a symbol of Pomona's power, began to slip into the Samhain rites. It was said that if you caught one with your teeth, you might catch a glimpse of your future, a lover, a fate, a fortune yet to unfold. A harmless game today, but then it was a serious divination. The boundary between the worlds was still thin.
Oh, is that where bobbing for apples come from? I always wondered why people was trying to get apples with their mouth. I thought it was real stupid, but I guess that come from this, bro.
Apple was more than a fruit, it was a portal. And there was Feralia, a day set aside by the Romans to honor the restless spirits of the dead. Here too were customs that mirrored Samhain's darker tones, offerings left for the souls who wandered the earth, prayers whispered to ease their journey. As the two cultures intertwined, the boundaries between their traditions blurred. Roman settlers, with their fear of forgotten souls, found a strange kinship with the Celtic reverence for the dead who might return. What emerged was a woven celebration of both the harvest and the haunting, a festival of ripening life and encroaching death. This merging of beliefs wasn't without its shadows. The blending of Roman and Celtic customs added layers to the rituals, making them richer but also more haunted. The apple games of Pomona carried with them the weight of prophecy. The offerings to the dead of Feralia echoed the gifts to the wandering spirits of Samhain. The old fears never disappeared, they simply wore new faces. The Romans brought their sense of order, but the Celts knew that some forces could never be tamed. So Samhain, now tinged with Roman myth and ritual, continued to evolve, retaining its eerie overtones, its whispers to the dead, and its glances into the other world. It became a celebration of many masks, a union of harvest of spirits of gods both new and old, a night that grew ever more potent, a gathering of traditions that spoke not just to the living, but to those who walked just beyond the light. Now the stage was set for these blended beliefs to take yet another turn, to bend to new masters and survive in ways.
So it started off, boom, we trying to be in disguise. Then the Romans came through, was like, okay, y'all can still do that, but we're going to put our own little spin on it. And they got a little bit closer to what we know. Now we're going to see who brought it all the way home.
Is both familiar and strange.
There we go, the Christians came through.
When the Christian church set its sights on the British Isles, it saw not only a land of tribes and kings, but also a realm rich with ancient customs, a place where the old gods still walked. The church knew that to conquer the spirit of a people, one must also conquer their festivals. And so began the Christianization of Samhain. The church, ever shrewd, sought not to erase Samhain, but to subsume it. In the 7th century, Pope Boniface IV introduced All Saints' Day, a feast to honor the holy martyrs and saints. Originally celebrated in May, it was later moved to November 1st, a date that aligned with Samhain. A calculated move to redirect the devotion of the people, from spirits and fairies to saints and the blessed dead. But it did not end there. To follow All Saints' Day, the Church added All Souls' Day on November 2nd, a day to pray for the souls still trapped in purgatory, wandering between this life and the next. In doing so, they transformed a pagan night of thin veils into a Christian observance of the afterlife. Yet the night before these holy days remained untamed, All Hallows' Eve. The Church's intent was clear: to sanctify a time of year thick with pagan ritual. But old beliefs have a way of surviving beneath the cloak of new faith. All Hallows' Eve, later shortened to Halloween, became a strange hybrid, a night that retained its ancient roots. Bonfires still flickered on hillsides, candles still burned to guide the lost souls home. And children still roamed the night in disguise, now cloaked as saints or devils rather than spirits or fairies.
And it's still kind of like that. At least in the U.S., it's like a combination of whatever you want it to be. Some people don't like to say they celebrate Halloween because it's evil, you know what I'm saying? So they'll call it like fall festival, you know what I'm saying? They'll have it at the churches, give the kids trunk or treat. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But then you got the hardcore fans who want to do the parties and the Halloween costumes, etc., etc. But then you got the pagan traditionalists who are still bonfire and get a group of friends around and look at old spells and shit. You know, you never know what people into. You know what I'm saying? But it's all historic. Onward.
It was a night of dualities, where reverence for the holy dead brushed shoulders with the lingering dread of what else might be wandering in the dark. For while the saints and martyrs were invoked with solemn prayers, the people knew that the unseen forces of the world did not simply vanish. Witches, demons, and spirits of the wild still lurked, woven into the fabric of these new celebrations. The Church's holy days had not erased the fear. They had only given it new shapes and names. In medieval Europe, this dual nature flourished. The faithful lit candles in cathedrals for lost souls, while outside, the fires still roared against the black of night, warding off things older and darker than any Christian prayer could name. People spoke of saints, but also whispered of witches. They honoured the blessed dead, but feared the damned, believed in heaven, but kept a wary eye on hell. As the medieval nights grew colder and the fields lay bare, Halloween took on a life of its own, a night that was neither fully sacred nor fully profane. The lines blurred between the living and the dead, between the faithful and the forsaken. This was a time when the traditions of All Hallows' Eve began to merge with the folk customs of the common people, creating something altogether new and strange. One such tradition was souling, a practice that took root in the medieval countryside. On the eve of All Saints' and All Souls' days, the poor would wander from door to door, offering prayers for the souls of the dead in exchange for small cakes known as soul cakes. Each cake consumed represented a soul freed from purgatory, lifted higher toward the heavens. The custom may have had the Church's blessing, but it carried with it echoes of the older ways, the same offerings once left for restless spirits now given a new, more palatable form. In this mingling of food and faith, one can hear the whispers of a past where the dead were fed to keep their...
Hey, man, I'm with it. Let's bring that back. I'll go sing for cake. And I get to free the guys in the same token. This is beautiful, man. Let's bring that back. Onward.
Peace. From this souling grew another custom, guising. Here children and sometimes adults cloaked in crude costumes and masked faces roamed the night. They would dress as saints, angels, or, for the more mischievous, demons. Disguised from the gaze of spirits, or perhaps mimicking them, they would visit homes, reciting verses or singing songs in exchange for food, ale, or coins. The guise, a simple mask or costume, served both to entertain and to protect, a nod to a belief that in becoming something other than oneself, one might evade the wandering souls or the evil eye. But there were other things to fear on these nights. Creatures that crept through medieval minds and folklore, taking on lives of their own. Witches, thought to convene under the moon's light, casting spells and conjuring spirits, were said to be at the height of their power. The tales warned of their malevolent craft, their ability to summon storms or blight a neighbour's field with a curse. And then there were the ghosts. Souls who had not found rest, who returned to haunt the places of their lives, or worse, to seek vengeance on the living. There were banshees, whose keening cries foretold death, and spectral black dogs that prowled the roads at night, said to be...
Y'all believe in ghosts? I struggle. I wrestle with it. I think I'm gonna lean toward no. If you believe, comment below if you believe in ghosts, and if you got something that can change my mind, comment it below and I'll look at it on, bro.
The omens of doom. These beings were not mere stories to frighten children. They were woven into the very fabric of medieval life, both feared and venerated. People left offerings at crossroads for the restless dead or placed iron above their doorways to ward off witches. They carried charms, recited prayers, and drew symbols to keep the evil at bay. The church might offer comfort for the soul, but it could not always protect against what walked in the dark. And then there were the divinations, rituals to peer through the veil, to catch a glimpse of what fate had spun. On Halloween, young maidens might peel an apple in one long unbroken strip, tossing it over their shoulder to see if it would form the initial of a future lover. Others might stand before a mirror in a darkened room, lit only by candlelight, hoping to see the face of their true love, or perhaps a spectre of death. Hazelnuts were thrown into fires, each representing a possible suitor. If a nut burned brightly, love would flourish, but if it popped or cracked, the romance was doomed. And so, Halloween became a liminal space, neither fully Christian nor entirely pagan. It was a night where the sacred and the profane danced side by side, where holy hymns were sung, and ghost stories were told by the hearth, where the dead were honoured with prayers and feared with superstitions.
Right.
A night to remember the faithful departed and to keep the shadows at bay.
And there you got Halloween. Basically, that's what Halloween is today. You know what I'm saying? Like I was saying earlier, whatever you want it to be. It's R.I.P. to the homies. It's stay away from me to the demons. It's whatever you need it to be. Onward. But I'm going to be getting...
And as the winds of time continued to turn, this night of saints and spirits would make its way to a new world, carrying with it the weight of both reverence and fear, ready to evolve once more in the land across the sea.
Like and subscribe.
In the 19th century, the shores of America welcomed waves of Irish and Scottish immigrants, and with them came the traditions of Samhain and All Hallows' Eve. The old world spirits, myths, and customs found fertile ground in the new, and like seeds scattered in foreign soil, they began to grow in unexpected ways. In the bustling streets of New York, Boston, and beyond, the customs of the Celts took root and began to change. What was once a night of solemn remembrance and spiritual reverence started to transform under the glow of a different sky. Halloween in America became less about the souls of the dead and more about the living, a chance for a community to come together, to revel, to play, and sometimes to cause a little mischief. Gone were the medieval fears of vengeful spirits and wandering dead, replaced by a more playful yet still shadowed night. The immigrants brought with them the practices of souling and guising, which slowly evolved. Children, masked in whatever scraps and costumes they could muster, took to the streets, singing songs or telling rhymes, seeking not prayers but treats. It was a practice that would one day evolve into the iconic call of trick or treat. But here in these early American years, it was a dance between the old customs and the new land's possibilities. The hearths of America warmed to new traditions as well. Fortune-telling games were played by the fire's light, echoing the rituals of the old country. Apples and mirrors became tools of divination once again. Would a peel reveal the initial of a future love? Would a glimpse into a dimly lit looking glass show the face of a future bride or groom? These rituals, half spoken in jest and half in earnest, kept alive the threads of the past, even as the future of Halloween took shape. Ghost stories also found a home in the American Halloween. The dark tales that once whispered through the villages and towns of Europe now haunted the parlours and porches of New England. But new spirits were added to the mix, American phantoms and legends like the Headless Horseman or the ghostly ships that sailed off the coast of Maine. The night became one of telling and retelling, of blending the supernatural beings of the old world with the burgeoning folklore of the new. And then there was the mischief. With fewer ties to the sacred and more to the secular, Halloween became an evening where tricks ran hand in hand with treats.
I ain't never really been no trickster Halloween guy. Me and my friends, we wasn't really egging houses and TPing houses and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? We was more trick or treat as kids and then kick it as adults. You know what I'm saying? Was y'all ever out here throwing eggs at people's crib? I don't know. Maybe just because it wasn't safe to do that in my neighborhood, probably why we ain't do it. I don't know, man.
Houses might be pelted with eggs, or a gate might mysteriously vanish from its hinges, only to be found atop a barn the next day. Mischief Night, as it became known, was an outlet, a way for the younger generation to dance on the edge of rebellion, in a world that often demanded obedience. Thus in America, Halloween found a new life. It was a celebration that was still filled with whispers from the old world, yet it was evolving, turning towards something more communal, more festive, and perhaps a little more wild. From the hearths of immigrants to the streets of burgeoning cities, Halloween transformed, setting the stage for what it would soon become, a uniquely American night of revelry, reflection, and a dash of fright. The shadows of Samhain had crossed the ocean and found a new home, ready to blend and evolve yet again. As Halloween settled into American soil, the night began to change once more. By the early 20th century, Mischief Night had gained a reputation, an evening where pranks ran wild and the spirit of chaos reigned. Tricksters young and old took to the streets with devilish glee, soaping windows, overturning outhouses, and filling the night with a sense of unpredictable danger. The thin boundary between harmless fun and true havoc often snapped, and what began as playful mischief sometimes spiraled into acts that brought real harm and fear. Communities grew weary of this dance with disorder. The Great Depression only added fuel to the fire. Youngsters, frustrated and restless, turned to Halloween night as a stage for their discontent. What was once a festive evening of pranks could quickly become a night of vandalism, and the tricks began to outweigh the treats. Some towns even considered banning Halloween altogether, fearing it had become more of a threat than a celebration. A shift began. The air grew tense, not with ghosts and goblins, but with a desire to reclaim the night. Parents, teachers, and community leaders saw an opportunity to transform Halloween from a night of reckless abandon into something safer, something more structured. Organizations like the Boy Scouts stepped in, offering alternatives to pranks with parades and community parties. Schools hosted costume contests and pumpkin carving events, where children could channel their energy into something creative rather than destructive. The idea was simple: tame the chaos by filling the night with light and laughter. Towns and cities across America began organizing haunted houses, where the thrill of a good scare could be contained within walls. There were bobbing for apples, ghost story circles, and even Halloween-themed carnivals, where the tricks were replaced with games and the treats became the main attraction. Trick-or-treating, which had been a quaint practice in pockets of the country, began to spread, offering children a structured way to roam the night in search of candy rather than trouble. It was during these years that Halloween began to take on the shape we know today, a night not of devils and danger, but of family and festivity. What had been a wild, unpredictable mischief night was slowly transformed into an evening where children dressed as pirates and princesses, witches and superheroes, knocking on doors with an open hand and a hopeful smile. Halloween shed its darker skin once more, emerging as a night of organized joy rather than unrestrained mischief. Yet, beneath the costumes and the candy, the old spirit still lingered, reminding us that Halloween's heart beats with both sweetness and shadows. The transformation was nearly complete, setting the stage for Halloween to grow into the beloved, family-friendly celebration that would captivate generations to come.
Bring on capitalism.
With the reins of Halloween pulled tighter and the mischief turned to merriment, a new tradition began to rise from the shadows of the old, one that would redefine the night and become its beating heart. In the 1930s and 1940s, the call of trick or treat began to echo through the streets of America. It was a simple yet ingenious idea, a way to manage the wild pranks of Mischief Night by offering children a sweeter incentive. Rather than risk tricks, households could buy peace with a handful of candy. And so a ritual was born. The phrase trick or
Are you
treat
telling me that children extorted adults into trick-or-treating? That's kind of dope. I like it.
carried with it a playful threat wrapped in sugar, a choice between a harmless trick or the sweet reward of a treat. Children would don their costumes, transformed into monsters, ghouls and jesters, and move from house to house with bags and buckets, their steps filled with excitement and just a hint of mischief. For a few hours on this autumn night, they ruled the streets. Behind every door was the promise of chocolate, taffy or caramel, a small price to pay to keep the goblins at bay. As America emerged from the darkness of World War II, the nation found itself yearning for community, for connection, and for moments of simple joy. Halloween, now entwined with the tradition of trick-or-treating, became a beacon for the post-war suburban dream. The sprawling new neighborhoods, with their rows of houses and white
Does that
picket
pumpkin
fences,
have feet?
became the
This pumpkin is walking. Hell
backdrop for
no.
this new family-centric Halloween.
What am I watching?
Here, children could roam safely under the watchful eyes of their parents, moving from one porch light to the next, their laughter carrying through the crisp evening air. By the 1950s, Halloween had become a staple of suburban life, a night where children's imaginations could run wild in the safety of their own neighborhoods. But the shift wasn't just about safety or community. The candy industry, ever keen to find new markets, saw an opportunity and seized it. What began as a modest offering of homemade sweets and baked goods soon became an all-out rush for commercially packaged candy.
Thirsty.
The candy companies saw their chance and flooded the market with small, affordable treats, perfectly sized for a child's bag. Candy corn, chocolate bars, and bubblegum. These became the new currency of Halloween night. And the industry didn't just ride the wave, it helped build it. With clever marketing campaigns and colourful advertisements, they turned trick-or-treating into an American ritual, one that would see billions of dollars change hands every October. What had once been a night of pranks and whispers had become a commercial powerhouse, a celebration that lit up the stores as much as it did the streets. Halloween had become a night of sweet indulgence, driven by the insatiable demand for candy, where the tricks were softened, and the treats became the true treasure. Thus, the transformation of Halloween was nearly complete. No longer just a night for the bold and the mischievous, it was now a time for families, for fun, and for a taste of something sweet. The ghosts of the past still lingered, but they were now joined by a new spirit, one that was as much about delight as it was about dread, as much about candy as it was about creatures of the night. Halloween marched on, ever evolving, ever enchanting, carrying with it both the weight of tradition and the promise of a good scare, or perhaps just another handful of sweets. And while the streets filled with trick-or-treaters and the candy bowls emptied, another force began to shape Halloween into what it is today.
What's that?
A force both modern and ancient in its storytelling power, the influence of media. In the flickering shadows of Hollywood's silver screen, Halloween found new life, one that embraced both the thrill of fright and the warmth of fun. By the mid-20th century, Halloween was not just a night for costumes and candy. It had become a night for stories, terrifying, tantalizing,
That's
and
low-key. That's low-key true, bro. I feel like Halloween movies is what got me into Halloween. You know what I'm saying? You watch the Halloween movies, the Freddy versus Jason, the Chuckies, the et cetera, Them get you right. No, bro, you be out there ready to go trick or treat or drink Fireball. Not a sponsor. Onward.
with the supernatural. Hollywood took notice, crafting tales that drew from the deepest wells of human fear. Films like 1978's Halloween turned suburban streets into hunting grounds, where masked killers lurked just beyond the lamplight. Monsters, ghosts, and masked figures stepped out of folklore and into celluloid, becoming icons that would forever be tied to this dark holiday. The holiday itself became a character, something alive, waiting, watching, a night where anything could happen. Television joined the spectral dance as well. From family-friendly fare like It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown to chilling episodes of The Twilight Zone and beyond, TV screens flickered with haunted houses, shadowy cemeteries, and creeping creatures. The flicker of these images across American living rooms transformed Halloween into a shared experience, a ritual not just of costumes and candy, but of gathering to hear a tale, to be scared together, to feel that delicious shiver run down the spine. And in doing so, they planted seeds in the minds of millions, sowing a culture that grew increasingly entwined with fear and fascination. But this wasn't merely invention. Hollywood and television were tapping into something ancient. The jack-o'-lantern, grinning with a wicked, toothy smile, found its origins in the folklore of old Ireland, where turnips and gourds were hollowed out and carved to ward off spirits like Stingy Jack, a trickster who outwitted the devil but could not find peace in heaven or hell. The carved pumpkin became the face of Halloween in America, its glow both a guide and a warning. And then there were the ghosts, pale, translucent spectres that drifted across screens but had haunted human imaginations for millennia. From medieval beliefs in wandering souls to the Victorian obsession with seances and spirits, the ghost story was always a part of Halloween's DNA. But now, Hollywood brought them to life with a flash of special effects and a dash of drama, turning them from simple tales told by the fireside into the stars of the show. Monsters, too, found their place. Vampires, werewolves, mummies. The creatures of European folklore and ancient myth were given new forms, new fears to embody. And let's not forget the witches cackling over their cauldrons, flying silhouetted against the moon. Once feared as real threats, persecuted in the dark corners of history, they were now reborn in the glow of celluloid, a mix of terror and camp, casting spells that delighted as much as they terrified. Haunted houses, both on screen and in reality, became central to Halloween lore, a place where the lines between the real and unreal blurred, where actors in monster masks and mechanical ghouls gave a safe thrill to those brave enough to enter. Here, the haunted manor on the hill was not just a setting, it became a rite of passage, a way to flirt with danger while knowing you could always step back into the light. The media took the old bones of Halloween and dressed them in new flesh, creating a holiday that is as much about what scares us as it is about what entertains us. It is a night where ghosts from the past meet the flickering phantoms of modern fears, where the shadows are filled with both the playful and the petrifying, where ancient customs are wrapped in modern tales and sent out to knock on our doors. Halloween in the glow of the screen became a reflection of our deepest fears and our darkest delights, a celebration of the unknown, shaped by those who dared to tell its stories. Halloween, the night when shadows stretch long and the veil between worlds grows thin, has travelled far from its ancient roots. From the fiery rituals of Samhain to the flickering screens of modern-day horror, this night has always been one of transformation, a celebration that has worn many masks, each reflecting the fears and desires of those who gather in its glow. Once it was a time to honour the spirits, to appease the restless dead and seek protection from the unknown. Then it became a night of mischief and revelry, a playful nod to the darkness that surrounds us. And now it has become a cultural juggernaut, fueled by candy, costumes, and the collective thrill of a shared scare. Yet beneath the layers of consumerism and community, the ancient echoes remain. The flicker of a jack-o'-lantern's flame, the whisper of a ghost story, the thrill of donning a disguise. These are not just remnants of the past, but reminders that Halloween is more than a night of fun and games. It is a time when the boundaries blur, when the old fears resurface, and when the mysteries of the world linger just a little closer. So, as you carve your pumpkins and don your costumes, remember that Halloween is a night with deep roots, a night that has grown and changed with the centuries, but still carries the whispers of its dark, pagan beginnings. It is a time to honour the old traditions, to acknowledge the shadows, and to celebrate the dance between light and dark, life and death, that has always been at the heart of Halloween. The night may be filled with laughter and light, but the shadows still wait, just beyond the reach of the fire.
Shout out Brian Cunningham. Great video, man. If you enjoyed that, make sure you like and subscribe. We're going to be back with the spooky season videos. We out.